My next guest is a serial entrepreneur who's made a career out of solving some of our most frustrating problems. Paul English is the man behind Kayak.com, a one-stop shop for booking everything you need for travel, Lola.com, which does the same thing for business travel and now spending, and my personal favorite, as he knows, Get Human, which helps you get through those endless automated menus when you have to make a customer service call to actually speak to a person as quickly and painlessly as possible. Now English's focus is on the podcast world and the overwhelming number of options out there. His newest venture is called Moonbeam. It's a TikTok-inspired app that compiles the best 2 minutes of mountains of podcasts, searchable by category, lets you swipe and subscribe to your favorites. But this is just one of many of his current projects, which also include nonprofit work like Summits Education, which builds and runs schools throughout rural Haiti. He also inspired author Tracy Kidder to tell his story in A Truck Full of Money, Coding, Mania, Love, Genius, the life of an American entrepreneur. And somehow, with all that, Paul has found a few minutes to get away, and he joins me now. Paul English, it's good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you, Jim. Thank you.
Before we get to Moonbeam, we were just speaking about the nightmare on the southern border and the deportation of thousands of Haitians. I mentioned that your Summits Education operates somewhere in the neighborhood, I think, of 40 schools, mostly in rural Haiti. How were they affected by the earthquake and the political upheaval there?
Yeah, luckily, our work is in the Central Plateau, up in the mountains, near the Dominican border. And you're right, we have 40 schools there right now, 350 educators and just about 10,000 students.
Wow.
We were lucky that the earthquake didn't hit the Central Plateau. And in fact, we mobilized some of our resources down to the south where schools were hit to provide them with supplies and assistance, working with some partners down there. But as far as like the civic craziness that's going on there, for me, education is the only answer. If a country is to find its own way out of its problems, it starts with education, and that's really what we're trying to do.
Well, you can say that about Afghanistan and girls too, and I would agree
with
you
absolutely.
Wholeheartedly. So on to Moonbeam. I did a 10-second explainer. I think you can probably do a little better than I did. Expand on it a little bit, if you would, Paul. What's Moonbeam?
Yeah, I mean, the podcasts are very exciting. I listen to podcasts all the time. I have for many, many years. But I find it difficult to find new podcasts. There's so many interesting shows out there, but how does one find them? And with the leading apps that are out there today, the Apple Podcast app and Spotify, you end up reading a lot and scrolling through and reading and reading and reading. And what we wanted is something, as you mentioned, inspired by TikTok, where you open Moonbeam and immediately it starts playing some content. They're human curated clips, kind of best moments of the best podcasts. If you don't like it, you swipe up, go to the next, the next, the next. And we have a machine learning system that then predicts what you're going to like next.
Human curated, meaning a human being actually listens to all these?
Yeah, believe it or not, we have teams of humans that are subject experts. Yeah, you know, comedy, sports, like different categories. And they sample some of the most popular podcasts and curate down to like the best 2-minute clip from each podcast. That lets people sample podcasts without having to listen to the whole hour.
You know, was this generated, you said you're a big podcast fan, by your interest or the public's? I was trying to get the latest numbers on the number of podcasts. The best I could do was February of this year, where according to Forbes, this is incredible, 1.75 million podcasts with 43 million episodes. So even, I assume that's gone up a little bit. So it was to meet the need or to meet your own need? Or the public's need or your own need? No, I'm serious.
Well, yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, to tell you the truth, each one of my companies, Kayak and Lola and Get Human, it starts with a frustration of something that I've experienced personally. Good. And for me, for podcast, it was, how do I discover that unique content? And Moonbeam works exceptionally well for me. And we're getting really good feedback now from other users that they are discovering good content.
So discovering good content, what have you discovered, and except for Moonbeam, you would never have in the months since this thing has been up and running?
I mean, yeah, one show that Moonbeam helped me discover, and this is early on in the show's history. It later became a popular show, but it's called Dolly Parton's America.
Oh, it's WNYC, actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
WNYC,
and
yeah.
Like, I thought I liked Dolly Parton. Everyone kind of likes Dolly Parton. But I'm telling you, after listening to this podcast, She's amazing. And I never would have listened to that had it not shown up in my feed in Moonbeam. I've listened to the Writer's Almanac, which is kind of this date in history. It's a Garrison Keillor show that I discovered on Moonbeam. I've listened to Poetry Unbound, which is an Irish poet who reads a poem and then interprets it for you and then reads it again. And that's been really fun as well.
And my understanding is, do you not try to connect the podcaster and the podcastee, for lack of a better expression? Am I right about that?
Yeah, the host and the listener. That's
How's
the
that
second
work?
goal. Well, the first goal is discovery. And the second goal is I have friends like Young Me Moon at HBS who has a very popular podcast called HBS After Hours. She told me her big frustration is she'll have millions of people listen to her podcast over a semester. She has no idea who they is and who they are, and if what part of the show they like or not. So we allow them, just again, like TikTok, give feedback during the show, what you like, what you want to share, what you save. We give that directly to the hosts. We're letting them tip the host. If you want to click a button, you can send $1 if you're inspired by a host. And soon we'll let you join the email list in one click.
Tell me you're not taking a piece of the tip. You're not, are you?
We're not.
Really, you're not?
We're really not.
So how are you making any money?
The plan is, I mean, with everything on the internet, there's only two ways to make money. You either sell ads or you sell a premium service for a fee. And I think what we're going to look at is, as you're swiping up, listening to the next show, the next show, the next show, we're going to have some promoted shows in there. And we'll mark them as promoted. If you don't like it, you just swipe up immediately. We'll go to the next one, the next one.
Do you remember the great moment when former Senator, I think Hatch from Utah, turned to Zuckerberg and said, well, Mr. Zuckerberg, at a hearing, if the service, meaning Facebook, is free, how do you make any money? And Zuckerberg looked back at him and he said, ads? So in any case, you know, on one other related note, I mentioned Lola is your creation as well. I went to Lola.com, just curious, right before I saw you a couple of minutes ago, and it says something like, I don't know, stay tuned, signed by you and a colleague. Stay tuned for what?
We have a big announcement coming in the next couple of weeks. So Lola, as you know, as you mentioned in the intro, is what Kayak did for consumer travel, Lola set out to do for business travel. We really want to make business travel simpler. The pandemic happened a year and a half ago. Business travel went to zero. Our revenues went to zero. We had to pivot really rapidly. So instead of going to CFOs and saying, buy Lola and we'll reduce the cost of your travel and make travel more convenient, we then went to CFOs and said, buy Lola, we'll improve all employee spend of any type. So we did this hard pivot to a fintech company. And the next chapter for Lola, we're about to announce. I mean, unfortunately, we did decide to shut down the travel service, but there are some exciting products and a new direction and new partnerships that we have a big announcement coming in the next couple of weeks.
Fabulous. Can we turn to one of your other nonprofit ventures? I think most people watching know that you're the co-founder of King Boston. You contributed $1 million to get the thing rolling. Most people are familiar with the Embrace, this beautiful, well, there it is, this beautiful clasping of hands that is modeled on the clasping of hands of two people who met in Boston, Dr. King and Coretta King. Could you give us an update on what's going on, not just with the Embrace, but if people don't know, there's obviously a much broader racial and economic justice agenda for King Boston beyond just the installation in Boston Common. What's going on?
Yeah, the good thing about this project is it really has excited a lot of people across Boston to get involved and to take a serious look at racial justice in our city and how to improve things so that no matter what neighborhood you live in or what your background is, we want Boston to be an opportunity for everyone. We've been able to raise nearly $20 million to date for people who want to help participate and fix racial equity issues, things from wealth equity, health equity, education. And we are starting a number of programs focused on those three issues. We're going to be issuing an annual report, kind of the state of the city when it comes to racial equity. The memorial itself is breaking ground next summer, be completed the end of next year. And then a big announcement we had yesterday is when MLK was a student in Boston at Boston University, he preached at the 12th Baptist Church in Roxbury, which is a wonderful, wonderful church. And yesterday we presented 12th Baptist with $1 million check from our backers to help the 12th Baptist continue the amazing work they've been doing in Roxbury.
Well, I'll tell you, that's really impressive and important. Paul, it's great to see you. Be well. Good luck. I was going to say with Moonbeam and everything else, and we'll stay tuned for the Lola announcement. It's good to see you.
Thanks a lot, Jim. Great to see you.
Be well.